Good morning, everyone. Good morning to my fellow students here in the room at Life of Learning, and good morning to those of you online who are joining us for our Sunday class with Guy Finley. My name's John. I'll be the host for our session today. Our agenda, again, for those who are joining us for the first time, is that on Sunday mornings, Guy will present a talk that lasts about 60 minutes, and then afterwards we take a short break and then come back for an open discussion with Guy, and one in which the students in the room here and those of you online are asked to participate, to ask questions, to make comments, to share, and the objective of it is always to deepen our understanding of the material that Guy has presented. So hopefully we will participate here in class, and hopefully those of you online will do the same. During the broadcast, we do want to make this one just technical announcement. It's summer here in Southern Oregon. We're experiencing a particularly hot spell right now. And that means occasionally there have been power outages. And so we want to let you know online that should we experience something like that, please, we encourage you, stay connected with us. Keep refreshing your browsers, keep checking back in again. We will be doing our very best. We have plans A, B, C, D, E, F, and G as to what to do in that situation, and we should be back online within minutes. So please stay with us. And as always, as Guy tells those of us in the room, use that moment. Use that moment to be here and to return here until we are reconnected again. Lastly, I'll just remind the students in the room, if you have a cell phone, please do check and just make sure you've turned it off. And I think with that, we're ready to get started. Here is this morning's topic and the title that Guy has written. See through this fear and start walking through the endless worlds within you. And here is the first key lesson. Believing that avoiding the experience of an unwanted or otherwise unknown moment is the same as freedom from the fear of it is like being lost in the African bush, crossing paths with a hungry lion, and hoping that if you just look the other way, it will too.
Good morning. Or good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you're joining us. I'm glad that you're here. I hope that you will lend as much attention as you have, because we're going to look at something that, as far as I'm concerned, is true of every meeting we have, but might just change your life. Might change the way that you see and experience your life. And when all is said and done, what is your life other than the moment-to-moment experience of the conditions that you find yourself in? We have an unfortunate predilection, a tendency to believe that somehow the conditions outside of us are responsible for the content of our experience. And the condition is not responsible for the content of your experience. It's responsible for revealing to you the innumerable ways in which such an experience can be measured and then taken in as being your own, forever mistaking the limited participation in that moment for being the whole of its possibility. And it's never. There's always something more than meets the eye. For those of you that like Christian scripture, we're going to look at a couple ideas. Christ spoke of the need for eyes to see and ears to hear. A strange passage, let the dead bury the dead. And corresponding ideas through other scriptures, you'll see how they all meet together in a certain kind of understanding that's possible for us, but that presently is out of reach because of the way in which we all look at life and look away from anything that we don't want to see? How many of you know that you look away from what you don't want to see? And in case that's not clear, when you would rather get up and look at anything other than what the moment has brought to you to look at and do, those distractions are an avoidance. Our life is much more an avoidance of life than it is the fulfillment of its possibilities. I can guarantee you that. So let's get going. Going to build a big picture, and then we're going to have a little science expedition. If I had time, I would have sent to Kate some graphics and even some audio experience of what I want to show you so that you can participate wholly. W-H-O-L-L-E-Y and H-O-L-Y. And in the end, they're the same. So as you know, or maybe you don't, not much is required for your physical development. You can't help but grow into an adult. And no more than any other natural animal goes through the various physical stages that it does from birth to death. Most of these animals, including ourselves, know only these tiny little experiences connected to the sensations of going from childhood into teenageness, into young adult, old, and all the rest of that. And the bulk of your experience of life is connected to the way in which this body and its habits are inculcated into a world that it is always looking for ways to enhance or avoid the experiences connected to our physicality. Do you understand that? A lion cub is born making these little turning merps, and it goes out and it discovers the world that it's in. It's in its environment, and that lion cub, its nature, so to speak, is not only in symmetry with the world that it's in, but its nature is developed through the relationships that it goes through. It matures through the relationships that its physical being is developed through. Yes, please? But hidden inside of a human being, if you want inside of this body, but I would argue that this body is not what it appears to be at all. Hidden inside of this body is more than just this natural environmental inculcation where the full breadth and width of our experience is limited to that which the body prefers or doesn't prefer, including the psychological body with its conditioned content. That hidden in this body, there is another body. There is a seed within this seed. As we are now, the seed of our body just becomes the seed of another body, and God help the body that has come from the seed of this body, because it's born into a world full of human beings who never understood what it meant to develop themselves. All you know how is to cultivate your pleasure and avoid your pain. That's what you call development. Or, just to give a little credit, to develop an intellectual center or develop an emotional center, because by right you're drawn to want to explore the possibilities that that part of you in that seed is drawn to. This is where artists come from. But as you should know, so many artists, as well developed as their aspects are in terms of their creative capacity, they're by and large complete wrecks who often take their own lives or help others destroy theirs when they are drawn to the identification with that so-called artistry. So inside of us is a kernel of corn. Christ spoke of it. Unless this kernel of corn lies in the ground, abides alone, nothing will come of it. And what is this seed in this seed? Without giving names to it, which is our predilection, it is a longing to grow into another order of being. And it makes no sense to this physical being at all, other than the momentary pleasure of identifying with some image of ourselves that maybe we can become something even more special in this world, like King Solomon. But something inside of us that is more than just the physical organism wants to go beyond the physical. It doesn't know how to even speak of it. But it's there drawn, and unlike our physical development, we are asked to explore, to develop, and basically give what this subtle need is of this subtle body, so that in the exploration of what it wants to see, what it wants to do, what it longs to understand, we begin to come into agreement with it, so that our life begins to take on not just this longing for the pleasures and the powers and the possessions, or to avoid the pains and the sorrow. We begin to want to understand something about the whole of our life, instead of mistaking these little parts as being the whole of our life. Understand? But unlike the lion cub, who is developed involuntarily, do you understand that? There's no voluntary aspect of a lion's nature to grow into a full-grown lioness. It's just what lions do. Unlike the involuntary development of natural creatures, this development that I'm speaking to you about, your spiritual development, must be voluntary. There is no spiritual evolution the way you want to imagine, because evolution at the level of this body is part of a cycle of time, its content reshaped and reorganized and brought into something that fits the time. But that is not the development of the heart. The heart does not grow by itself. It can't. Your understanding can't grow by itself. It can't. Your head's going to grow by itself. You understand that, don't you? These images grow by themselves, don't they? Even that's not true. They're still connected to a system that oversees their nourishment and ultimately the neurosis that comes with being an imbalanced human being. So, first part, there is no other way that this voluntary development can take place without voluntary experience. No development of a voluntary nature unless it is accompanied by a voluntary willingness to experience that which your eyes have been open to, God willing, that your ears may be starting to hear, that your heart may be starting to feel. So without the voluntary willingness to explore this world that cannot be seen with your eyes and heard with your ears. Christ said, eyes to see and ears to hear. Without that, no chance. Bring up the second key lesson, please. The one prerequisite for those who would make the great journey within is that not only must we agree to leave behind us the imagined safety net of the known, but that we keep walking willingly into and through the wild lands of ourself with no intention other than to discover and realize all that we are given to see. I don't know where that falls on you, but I can tell you that with every bit of this unconscious nature that it can muster, you avoid running into anything that you don't understand on the spot. Any moment that gets outside this narrow frequency of this experience is immediately recognized by the body connected to that experience as being alien and dangerous to it, because it isn't known within that narrow band of understanding. And without knowing it, human beings, without any awareness of it all, relegated to this tiny little narrow band. That's what death is. That's what it means to die in yourself before you have the chance to die to yourself. True or not, children generally, wide-eyed, will more or less just leap into whatever the unknown experience is. Yes or no? It's fascinating. Just love to watch children. Adults, when they come to an unknown experience, by and large, they just come to a stop and start analyzing. Yes or no? Isn't that? And then when you get older, the tendency is just to avoid altogether. So these are like 3 stages that we can recognize. God willing, we can see it in ourselves. You have to see, does your life get bigger, more larger and larger because you're willing to go into these situations, these moments where something in you go, oh, no. That's going to be too uncomfortable for me. I don't want to go have that conversation that I need to have because I'm not sure of the outcome, meaning it's not within this narrow bandwidth of what I call my life experience. So that bit by bit, the whole idea of risking of risking the unknown, of risking the experience that we don't have an understanding of yet. All we want is experiences we understand, and we place the need to understand on all experiences before we go into them. Yes or no? Out loud so everybody can. Yes. And anything that is seen as outside of that band, we meet with the idea I've got to protect myself. Yes? Not wanting to see, do, or experience anything that makes us uncomfortable, and avoiding at all costs the fear of that moment that will act upon us and do what? What is the fear of any moment? Please, why am I, here it is. What is the fear of this reluctance, this avoidance? What is it? Resistance to what? My identity. I don't want that experience again. You have to add the word again. And it's so convoluted. The very not wanting of an experience again is the experience you don't want. But I believe somehow the avoidance of an experience that I don't want is protecting me. When it's not protecting me, it's imprisoning me in this narrow bandwidth of the known, in which the only thing that's possible for me to enjoy is that which I've already measured and put inside of that bandwidth and want the repetition of it. So that for us, our life is about the repetition of experience that's known and pleasurable. That's death. That's death. And you need to understand that's death if you ever hope to have a life in this body that doesn't belong to this body, but to the divine that sowed this body into this world. Can't tell you how many times I've heard people say in one way or another, I don't ever want to experience that again. I'll never go through that again. Every time I hear someone say it or I see it on their face, my heart is sorrowful. You know why? Because that person, when they're saying, I don't want to go through that again, or you can see that grand reluctance. No, don't ask me. Don't ask me to do anything like that again. That person lives inside of a prison the size of this petty little thought that has decided the experience that I had one time of anything similar to this is not worth going again. So at all costs, I'm going to ensure that I remain in this little band called the music of myself, the frequencies that I'm used to living from. When you say, and you may say it out loud, most of us don't say it out loud, but if you look at people and you examine yourself, you can hear it. I'm not going to go through that again. I remember, I can't take too much time. I remember the first time my heart was smashed. I mean, if you remember the first time you fell in love, I mean really fell in love, and then God help you, but he can't at this point. Your heart was crushed because that person lied, cheated, or betrayed you. I remember that so well. My mother was like 15, 16, and I was in the downstairs beating my head against the bar down there. My mother come, what are you doing? Then the old popular, don't worry, there's more fish in the sea. Like I really want to hear about fish when I'm, And I remember so clearly, I can remember it being formed in me. And it was a total collapse of a certain quantum field. I will never go through this again. It's so painful. I remember that. Do you remember any moment like that? And do you think it went away? Or does that little tiny seed of negative energy produced by not understanding the condition and creating from it a very definitive sense of self, which is all this nature can do? Do you understand? That's part of your inculcation into this world, is going through what this world does to everyone who comes into it, only failing to see that the partial experience must not be considered the whole of one's life, and it becomes that. So that I'll never go through that again is a death wish. It is a death wish that is fulfilled every single time you meet a moment that you don't want to enter into or invited into. And the minute that it comes, that wish comes up. I don't want to go through that again. And what happens in that moment? This is the unseen, slow death of avoidance. The unseen, slow death of avoidance. This is what keeps human beings from discovering that not only is there nothing to be avoided in the moment that it is unavoidable, but that those moments, regardless how unavoidable they seem, have come to void you of this fear that lives inside of you of an experience that you can't immediately put into that small bandwidth of the known. Are you following me, everybody? To understand that this seed within this seed is created to be able to experience anything and everything, because everything and anything is a part of its totality. But it's a totality that is completely hidden from human beings. It's mentioned in scriptures east and west, but it's there. Eyes to see and ears to hear. I have eyes and ears, but my eyes and my ears see things to avoid and hear about conditions that I don't want to go into. What are these other eyes and ears? Do you understand this? Nice deep breath. I'm going to slow way down now. I'm going to go into the science part of this talk. This is where I would have had Kate play this for you. The earth has a natural frequency. It's called the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance. The earth actually has a natural frequency. It pulsates at a rate of 7.83 hertz. Now don't get worried. Hertz is a terminology for frequency. And this natural frequency is the earth's heartbeat, so to speak. It's connected to everything that unfolds within the earth and between the ionosphere and the biosphere that interacts with it. It is a ceaseless. It is sounding out even as I speak. But the problem is 7.8 kilohertz is way out of our audible range. We can't hear that, the sound of the earth tone. You can't hear it. The moon has the moon has a frequency, and the moon's frequency, I want to find my little note here if I can find it. It's not that important, but I'd like to have it. 4.6 hertz. Mars, 144. Forget the numbers. The key here is that you've heard of the music of the spheres? I'm describing it to you. Except the music of the spheres can't be heard with these ears or seen with these eyes. But the human body, which incidentally has a resonance to it that is very close to the earth. Not by accident, I might add, since you're made from it. So there's a resonance between the earth and this body, and because this body is in fact a receiving instrument, it is capable of receiving all the different frequencies, including light. Light is a frequency. Color is the frequency of visible light, and it ranges, listen to this, from 430 trillion hertz to 750 trillion hertz. Now, you have to understand, you and I, our range is 15 to 20. That's what we hear and see, 15 to 20. So anything outside of 15 to 20, we don't hear, we don't see. But I live in it. I've tried to talk about this in different ways before, like when you watch maybe the leaves of a tree capturing sun and being moved by the wind. You look at that, you see the shimmering on an ocean. You look at all that, you don't know. Who you are feels every individual movement, sees any individual, sees it all, but brings it all into a constant similar experience that is measured and brought into what we would call the sphere of our experience. But the source of the sphere of our experience is way outside of our capacity to be conscious of that experience in terms of knowing it in that moment. I'm just trying to give you a big picture. Are you getting this big picture? So all I live in is this tiny little band. Go over and hit the note C, please, quickly, and hit it soundly. I hope that you can hear that online. Do it again. Now that note has hertz. It has a certain number. If it was the note A, for instance, it'd have 440 cycles per second. That's what the note is. But when you hit the note, hit it again. That initial is right at the frequency, but everything after that has harmonics. So that as the frequency diminishes, it begins to take on the characteristics of the original note. So that you're hearing not just the note C, but everything that gives the note C the experience you have of that sound. Hit the note C and E. Oh, a new experience. Now I have two dimensions to my life. And not just two dimensions, but all that's connected in between those notes and their harmonics. Now hit the chord. Ba-da! Now, you know how often you hear that? Meaning, do you know how often you experience that in life? Almost never. Even though it's always being sounded. Hit the fourth note with that chord. Any note, B or F. Oh, that's a little, I'm kind of, where's that going? So music is a way in which is conveyed to us as human beings at our limited level of understanding the relationship not just between these notes, but what it evokes inside of us as we hear it. Thanks, Terry. Everybody, you tracking with me? I've used this phrase before, but I'm going to change it slightly. We as human beings, this seed within this seed, have an infinite capacity to realize perfect symmetry. Perfect symmetry. Symmetry means that which is like something else, that which is facing something else, and that is very much like it, so that I can't hear and feel those notes unless I have a corresponding string inside of myself that when it hears it vibrates. And then when it hears two notes, it captures that and the harmonics. So that I'm all the time, without any awareness of it at all, created as an instrument of the divine. Designed to experience all of the frequencies at all times. But I don't know anything about all the frequencies at all times because I'm overwhelmed by any frequency that isn't in that stupid little note C called conditioning. If I knew the extent to which you live from something that can't wait to crush your possibilities of being fearless, you would cast it off And one day, by God's grace, you will have enough understanding to be able to cast off at all points and times anything that grabs your mind and says no. Anything else, no, no. Anything that does that. Why? Because you'll understand you're refusing the possibility of experiencing that within you lives something beyond the conditioned experience you have of it. That's never not sounding, I might add. That's never not stirring and awakening this body physically and the seed that lives within it spiritually. So that a person begins to recognize, you know this, how many of you have moments, it's a beautiful day here in the morning still, it's not 115 yet, but in a beautiful morning like this, it's 72 degrees, you walk outside, the birds, the bees, the deer, Frankie, everybody's there, everybody's having a grand old time, nobody's irritable yet. I'm drawn into that light, aren't I drawn into that light? I'm drawn into the atmosphere. I'm drawn into the corresponding set of frequencies that as I am drawn into them sound out a certain note in me called harmony, a certain note called peace. Harmony and peace are the amalgamation of frequencies connected to an individual experiencing them in the moment, so that the harmony and peace is already there. There's never a moment in life that isn't in its own way harmonious with the conditions that create it. But for us, this is okay, that's not. Don't ask me to do that. Don't ask me to look at this. Don't let me look away from the tiger and maybe the tiger won't see me. Understand? And if it's true that we have this infinite capacity for perfect similarity, do you understand what that? Isn't it? Look, we're in this body. It's gross. I don't mean negatively gross. It's just gross. It's an animal. And the body itself has no more in fact, this body has less skills than most animals. We just happen to have an opposing thumb so we can pick up a piece of pizza. But we have gifts that we don't know about. And the gift that I'm talking to you about today is a voluntarily received gift. It's given freely, but you must, on your part, understand if I'm to receive the gift, then I'm going to have to do it voluntarily. I'm going to develop voluntarily by willingly experiencing everything that this little tiny bandwidth called my name rejects and resists. Because if I don't, I'm going to live forever imprisoned in the idea that something can be experienced that shouldn't be experienced. Do you understand? You're completely conditioned to believe this is good experience, that's bad experience. And I have no choice in it in the moment of that impression, because the minute that action stirs this note, something in me goes, oh, not that note. You remember that note? That F sharp, that D flat, when they broke your heart, left you there feeling helpless. Remember that? Not that note. And immediately the thing is surrounded, enveloped in a certain known frequency called self-protection. And once that's taken place, can you not see that every other possibility inherent in that moment, when that note is struck, you begin to die to it. And it fades out. But the thing about fading out is that it's never not being sounded. There's never not something that is interacting with this infinite set of strings called the human soul. So that it's always stirred and it's always being awakened. But what it is being awakened to has to be met with the agreement on the part of the instrument within which it lives to experience its awakening. If I told you that you reject summarily the awakening of your soul, would you believe that? Would you? You say, no, of course not. I'm all on fire. I love my soul. I got soul, baby. I love soul. Stir my soul. I want to get stirred. I go to church. Hallelujah. I want all kinds of stirring, unless it's talking to you. Because then I don't want to be stirred at all. And then I'm convinced that what is stirring me is because of you. Failing to see that I must have, and by necessity. By necessity. Why did the Good Samaritan stop on the road and help the one man that all the religious hypocrites of all ilk didn't? Infinite capacity for perfect similarity. You say you want to be kind and helpful and loving to human beings. You can't be kind and helpful and loving to anyone unless that someone happens to be resonating in a certain bandwidth that you're comfortable with, because the moment that you're not comfortable with their bandwidth, you will increase their pain in order to escape seeing your own. Where do you think compassion comes from? Where do you think compassion comes from? Does it come from dissimilarity? Does it? Does compassion come from dissimilarity or from similarity? And the more perfect that similarity, the more perfect that compassion. Where does impatience come from? Where does impatience come from? There's an experience that I blame on the condition these eyes and ears see and hear, failing to see that what I see and hear with these eyes and ears belongs to a consciousness that long before that circumstance unfolded, painted it as being danger. Will Robinson, don't go here. Don't have anything to do with this feeling. Blame them. In fact, live with this blame for as long as you're in this body, so that you can continually feel the thing that you say you don't want to feel. Because that's all within that little bandwidth. Isn't it? What if you knew that without having to take thought, and can you see that? See, this is why I have to go back and forth and try to bring you in. Can you see the moment that anything falls outside of this? You understand what this bandwidth is? Every person in this room, you know what even if you're friends at all with somebody, you know their bandwidth. You live with somebody, you know their bandwidth. And carefully tread. I'm about to go outside of the known bandwidth of my friend or family member. And they're looking at you and they're going, don't sound that note. Don't use that tone with me, yes or no. Don't look at me. Don't let me see that color on your face. These are all things that are invisible to our eyes and ears, but that we experience with this subtler body that we don't even know we have, and that is crying to be developed. To not develop this interior body is to miss the entire purpose of your life on this planet. And that's everything you're trying to do. Every adventure that you take is always an adventure into a known or anticipated bandwidth. There's a right part that you hope maybe there'll be an impression I've not had before. But why do I want a new impression? A new sound, a new chord, a new bit of music to add to the overall composition. But what you have to understand is that the composition of the soul is created in such a way that it is meant to have everything touch it at all times. Not that we can be present to all things at all times. The love of a beautiful day is close to it, because now why? Because there's no me measuring anything. There's just the fulfillment of that particular chord in that moment. I'm not sitting there going, I wonder why it looks like this. If only that leaf were angled slightly different to catch that one little bit of sunlight, then it would be a perfect day. That usually, maybe for some of you it does, I realize that. But by and large, it's whole, isn't it? And why is it whole? Because there's no distinction in the symmetry. That's what unity, wholeness is. No distinction in the symmetry. As perfectly as this soul, as this sensitive, true part of ourselves, is capable of resonating with whatever the frequency is, the more perfect the frequency resonation, oh, this isn't too scientific, is it? The more perfectly they are in tune, the less I'm there. And yet, the less I'm there, the more I am. Why? Because I'm no longer apart from the relationship between the music of the spheres, the constant frequency that's producing everything that fills a human being. But you and I don't want to be filled by anything unless I've said in advance that I want to order it and it's ready when I get there. It is true. Where am I on time? There's nothing I can do to convince you. I'm trying to paint you a big picture so that you can see at some point that if I'm not willing to explore the experience of the moment, then I am relegated to live in the bandwidth of something that is dying in the bandwidth it demands life represents to me. That's all I have. You know, human beings, this is very subtle. Do you know that most men and women are aware to some extent that they're dying? Part of your desperation to have special pleasurable experiences is to avoid what cannot be avoided. This body has to die. But there's something in it that's undying. And it's undying because it is in perfect symmetry with what is eternal and always has been. It's just that there's no name to this perfect similarity, and that really bothers me because it should be called Guy. Shouldn't it be called by your name? Our life is endlessly interrupted. What you call an unwanted moment is a sudden experience of something that is interrupting the bandwidth that you are presently identified with and dreaming in. That's what you call a disturbance, the interruption of this bandwidth, of my usual sense of self, if you don't understand this term. That's what a disturbance, isn't it? Yes. And does my usual sense of self get bigger and bigger and bigger as I go along? Or the more I demand that everything stays inside of that little bandwidth, does the bandwidth begin to shrink? Shrinks. And the more it shrinks, the more I'm disturbed. The more I'm disturbed, the more I insist. The more I insist, the smaller the bandwidth. And then, adios. Miserable little human beings. Hating life. Blaming the discomfort that they experience on the conditions outside of them. Instead of understanding, every last one of these moments is a new note. I'm making this an ideal for you. I understand that. You can't grasp this yet. But some of you have had enough experience where you're recognizing that the very moment that was the most painful experience in the world, I couldn't shake it off, but it kept coming back until finally there was a similarity between the awareness of myself and the condition it was attracting. And lo and behold, I'm out of it. Something has transferred and transformed, and I'm a bit freer than I was. Why? Because I don't fear the experience anymore. I don't fear the experience anymore. You fear fear. Do you not? Yes. Notice I didn't say you fear this time and place. You fear fear. What is fear other than a time and place locked into that little bandwidth? Anything outside of that? So you're created to experience a world that proves to you that fear doesn't exist. Because as you grow into being able to allow everything that moves into you and through you to do so without interfering with it, then you begin to realize, holy God, I'm created to be the full expression of this moment, as was Christ when he was crucified. Willingly, I might add. Willingly. It's beyond the most minds. It just is. Because I know the questions and comments I'm going to get, I'm kind of negating them before we get into it. Yeah, well, what about this and what about that? What about it? Tell me one thing you've changed in this life by resisting the experience of it. One thing. But we don't call resisting the experience the fear of it. We call resisting the experience finding a new way to get around it or to look at something else so that my experience has nothing to do with the pain of this consciousness that lives in this tiny little bandwidth. You know, it's very hard to describe what I'm trying to, giving you pictures and emotional images, but to realize that anytime you suddenly feel afraid, anxious, angry, worried, nervous, do any of you ever feel that suddenly? That anytime that anger comes over you, in the moment that that anger has come over you, you are being asked to become a witness to an experience that no one and nothing else on this planet can have in that moment. And when you understand that that experience of anger isn't there to harm you, but to free you from the harm of being locked in a little bandwidth that wants to keep all of that in place, you start to realize, you know what? I always thought that this, here I am and I'm up against a deadline, this person wants me to do this, go there, all these things, I watch the news. I wish I had ways of showing you this. If you had your choice, and you could make it a vegetarian sausage if you want, do you want the tiniest little sausage you can have, or do you want a really big sausage? Which do you want? I want a big sausage. Yes, you do. Everything about your life is you want something bigger as long as it's part of what you want. Anything that's not part of what you don't want is relegated to this little tiny. Well, that's what this mind does. It takes everything and it pulls it into this little tiny sense of self so that I can know for sure this isn't good for me or I want that. And the more I want experience, the sausage gets bigger. I'm talking to you in terms that you should understand. I'm bringing it right down to earth. So if you're understanding this, you can begin to realize that there is something in me that anytime there's a certain, and I'm using the word now, experience with the same as similarity. Can you make the connection? Experience the same as similarity? Yes? So anytime there's this experience, if it's not part of what belongs inside of who I am and what I know to be good, then it is instantaneously defined as bad, isn't it? And the minute that this reaction, this conditioned reaction, says that's bad, what do I become in relationship to that moment? Do I become the one who goes, well, let me understand this? Or am I one who says, I understand what's happened and it's because of you, and then my mind is relegated into a smaller and smaller bandwidth that increasingly, listen to this, confirms me in the extent of the conflict I have with the experience of myself. Does that make, look, the more I'm confined to a certain set of experiences, can you see it is running in contradiction to the possibility of something inside of myself that wants to go past that kind of experience, that wants deeper experience? That's the passphrase. That's what I want for you, because you love that idea, don't you? I want a deeper experience. Yes or no? You can't experience anything more deeply than you are. Nor can you experience anything that you don't want other than from a part of yourself that doesn't want any deep experience because it proves how shallow you have been. To see this is to begin to realize this old axiom, you've heard it, popular in this particular teaching, the way out is what? Now, enlarge this. The way out is through, and here I am, I have a meeting. So the way out through means I'm going to go into this meeting. Here I am, I'm looking at this condition, I don't want anything to do with it. The way out is? So I agree to go into the condition. Am I going into the condition, Or am I going into the consciousness that has defined the condition? That's what I'm going into, isn't it? It's not the condition. The condition doesn't exist apart from the consciousness that has given its meaning. And that meaning is already defined inside of this consciousness. It's predetermined. That's what conditioning is. So when I agree to go into and through a moment that I don't want, what I'm really agreeing to is I'm going to go into this experience of myself. And I'm going to go in being willing not to try to control the circumstances, but to discover everything I can about this consciousness that wants to keep me locked up into this tiny little bandwidth sausage of self. The sausage of self. If I keep the food thing going, I'll have your attention all the way through. All I need to do is bring in sex now, and I've got you completely. I have to understand that to go through something means to consciously explore the infinite similarity I have with what it is bringing up in me. And the only way that's possible for a human being to do is if they start to understand, really nothing can happen to me. See, I know, I just went a note that had a gap in it, and you went, I mean nothing bad can happen to me. Are you kidding? I've had thousands of bad things happen to me. So that means when you say nothing bad can happen to me, that all of the things that happened to me that were bad didn't happen? No, they happened. But they didn't happen so that you could create this tiny little sausage note. A string of sausages. A string of notes. Tiny little string of notes where everything is measured before it has taken place, and my measurement becomes the experience that I blame my pain on. My measurement becomes the pain that I blame on the experience. The experience didn't have any quality to it at all, apart from what it's resonating inside of you. The experience didn't have any quality at all in and of itself. If a tree falls in the woods, no one's there to hear. Does it make a sound? No experience has a quality without the consciousness that lends it that quality. And when that consciousness can be understood as you are intended as an aspirant to understand, it contains all of the notes, all of the possibilities. Then you tell me how anything sounding can create danger inside of that consciousness when all that's happening is it is discovering and exploring the fullness of itself. I don't know if you can hear it online. The church bells next door are ringing. Pretty good timing. I tried to arrange this perfectly like that. Speaking of lies. To explore our infinite capacity to experience a corresponding quality, a corresponding similarity. See, once you understand that every experience is for the benefit of the consciousness willing to have it, you begin to realize that I spent my whole life, like how many of you get anxious? Come on. What is anxiety? Something's about to happen outside of this bandwidth. And I must at all costs make sure that whatever it is that I fear will happen, ensure that it doesn't happen because it's going to take me outside of this bandwidth. You're not meant to live in a bandwidth. You're not meant to live in that. But the only way you can know you're not meant to live in that is that you have to peek outside of it. If I look away from a moment I don't want, the tiger in the key lesson, if I look away from the moment I don't want, why am I looking away from the moment I don't want? I don't want the frequency, the experience of what's produced by the similarity between whatever is in me that meeting it, conditioned as it is, and the content that it brings up. I don't want that. And the more I don't want that, the more I am that. So I need to get toothpicks. I'm keeping the food thing going. So that here I am, I'm sitting at home, and I have a thought comes, I get an email, a text, and the minute it happens, what's the first thing, anytime, any unwanted moment comes along, what's the first thing that happens? Well, resistance, yeah. I look away to, me trying to think about why you said what you said is me looking away from the experience of it. Do you see that? So the first thing that happens in an unwanted moment is the gears start going. And the gears go and go and go, because if they go enough, all the smoke that's created up there will keep me from seeing the circumstance. The task, though, is to realize that there is a corresponding symmetry here. I dread this moment. What is the moment that I dread? The moment I dread is nothing other than what my mind tells me that moment is, and it will mean, given the experience I've had, and it's going to be outside that experience, which means I'm going to be afraid. But you don't understand, there's no fear outside of the known experience. Fear is keeping the known experience in place. Trying to. So when all is said and done, because I have to get to the exercise part of this, when all is said and done, to use words, it is the voluntary development of the inner man, the inner woman, the voluntary development of it that leads to that individual developing a fearless life, a divine life, one that recognizes it as never being given, shown, moved into the relationship with anything that isn't there, so that it can understand that's just a part of this moment. It's a part of myself. It's not the whole of me. And not only that, but I'm enriched. This is what you don't get yet. That's why it's difficult. Every time you go a little bit beyond what you think you can go beyond, and you experience the suffering required to do that, you have just gone beyond yourself and discovered another order of self that isn't beyond that. And then that just goes on and on and on. So that what you call this pain, psychological pain, but even physically, that what you call this pain is a threshold created by a certain willingness to endure or not endure a certain state. And anything outside of that state is seen as an enemy, when everything outside of that state is trying to bring you into the friendship of the divine, so that you can understand there's nothing that you can be given, shown, or taken through that isn't already a part of yourself. What if you, look, again, this is an idea, what if I'm laying on my deathbed, and we all will be on a deathbed? What if I'm laying on my deathbed and I understand this death thing is just part of the note? It's just part of the movement. It's just part of an experience. But when human beings die, is that what they're doing? They go, oh, I hate myself. Oh, I didn't live. Oh, no. No, it's part of your life. And in scale, the death of your life is the birth of understanding. So if you can take it in scale, you can see that anytime I'm willing to die to this little bandwidth, I'm actually being born in a new one. Because I don't fear the experience anymore. It isn't conditions that you fear. It's what you extrapolate from a conditioned mind about that experience that tells you it will be terrible, therefore I need to control it. This isn't to say that you don't control certain things given your powers to do so. Do what's in your power, refuse to do what's not. It just means that the whole idea of controlling experience, meaning the experience of it, is out the window. It means nothing to you. And one day it will mean nothing to you. Except it'll also mean in its nothingness everything to you, because you realize you're completely and constantly being enlarged, your understanding of life. So here's an exercise. I got to keep going. How many of you remember the Three Musketeers? What do you think that was about? Well, that was the slogan, the Three Musketeers. It was a novel about the Trinity. One for all and all for one was the motto of the Three Musketeers. One for all and all for one. That must be your spiritual motto. One for all. What's the one for all? Well, the part of me that vaguely realizes that the one is all. But now I got to get to the other part, all for one. Now I don't know if I'm that one or not. I think I'm one and done because it's all too much for me. One for all and all for one. Let the invisible action, the relationship, the living Trinity, let that impression, which is always a synopsis of it, a sound of it, let it be received all at once. That's the passphrase, all at once. All at once. No exceptions. No distinction. Whatever the experience, all at once. Oh, what will happen to you if you're able to do that? You'll see when first of all, do you understand this idea all at once? How many of you are terrified of it? Because all at once, no, I can't live with all at once. I must take certain parts out of this experience, dice, chop, slice them, put them in a casing called the sausage of self, and then know what to do to consume the problem. How's that for a phrase for you? That's what I have to do. I can't let this just be there. This fear all at once. You ought to be out of your mind. I'm told inside I've got to protect myself from this pain that I have. I can't let it be all at once. I can't let this weakness that wants to express itself through that sarcastic remark, I can't let that sarcasm be there all at once without expressing it to offload the pressure that wants to give birth to it. I can't let this anxiety, this fear be there all at once. Have you lost your mind? This anger all at once? If I let the anger be there all at once, I'll die. Yes, you will. You'll die to the illusion that it's your anger. But only when you let that resonation, you let that symmetry reveal that there's no one apart from the state that you believe your resistance to it proves to be so. All at once. Say it. No one there to analyze it, to sit outside of that moment and figure out the meaning of this impression, but to momentarily understand there is a perfect symmetry in this moment. Isn't there? Yes or no? Go back and hit that note C quickly. Boom. Is there any time and space between the sound of that note and your experience of it? Can you analyze that note? Hit two notes. Do you analyze that or do you experience it? Hit the chord. That's exactly what's happening in every level at all times infinitely. And you and I want to analyze it. Hold it. Stop that note. It's out of tune. It's out of tune. All at once. Watch yourself feel all at once. Watch your mind move all at once. Watch all of the sensations all at once. And let them be what they are without you trying to figure out why they are and what they are. Because every time you've got a why and a what, you've interrupted the experience of your true nature. Let it all hang out. Let's take a break, come back and have our dialogue.
Hey, there I am. Welcome back, everybody. Before we continue with our class and our open discussion with Guy, I have a couple of announcements, especially for those of you online who may be joining us for the first time. The first announcement is just a reminder that we have a full week of classes here at the Life of Learning. This Sunday morning class with Guy starts our week off, and then Guy will speak again on Wednesday night at 6 p.m. And those classes are, again, very valuable to join us and to participate in. We have Discovery Wednesday classes. We have Deep Dive Wednesday classes. They are great opportunities to continue to learn with us. Fridays, we have a 7 p.m. class, and that class is one in which it is student-led, and that class is always one in which we will be talking about the topic that Guy presented that previous Sunday. So this talk, we will be discussing this Friday, and we ask you to join us for that. And then finally, Guy speaks on Saturdays at Insight Timer.
I didn't change anything.
John Phelps, we can hear you guys, so it's distracting.
Oh, okay. We're having a little mic problem. All right, go ahead, John, sorry.
And then finally, one last announcement. As always, this full week of online classes, it is provided and sponsored by the Life of Learning Foundation, and we provide these classes free of charge and intend to do so as long as we can. But we do need your help, and so we always ask if you're willing and able and feel moved to help us in this mission, please do consider donating. You can go to our website at guyfinley.org/donate, and there you can find many different ways and opportunities to do so, and we thank you in advance for doing so. With that said, I think we're ready to begin our discussion. Let me just take a quick look on my laptop, see if we have currently no hands in the queue, and as always, those of you online, you can join us in the discussion. If you're on GoToWebinar, you can click a hand icon and talk directly to Guy. Those of you on Facebook and YouTube, you can send in written comments and questions. And a special encouragement, again, those of you in the room, at any time, you can come up here and speak from the microphone. I will just step aside, so please don't feel like you can't come up here because I'm up here. You are more than welcome to come up during the time as well. So, Guy, you have anything you'd like to say before we get started?
I'm grateful that my earphone's working now. No.
All right. Well, I see Lucy has raised her hand in the queue. So, Lucy, we're going to allow you to get our discussion going. So, Lucy, you're unmuted. Good morning.
Hi, Guy. Hi, everybody.
Good morning, Lucy. Good afternoon, wherever you are.
Good morning still. I'm just going to ask you a question about something that happened this week. So I got an email, and it was one of those zingers that just comes right out of the blue. You have no idea that it's coming. And it was about a financial matter and something that nobody had foreseen. And so right away I could feel this fear take over. And but I stayed with the sensations instead of going into thought and that kind of thing. And then after a period of time, another thought kind of came to me that it's not like you'd never ever thought of this possibility before. It wasn't like timing that you wanted. And then after that, kind of receded. But later I got thinking, was that just the mind coming in to kind of hijack you again? Or how long do you stay with the sensation or whatever? I just got thinking about afterwards that, was that something useful that was coming to me, or was that just another way of hijacking the experience?
Well, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, Lucy, but I can tell you, generally speaking, that when something is completely experienced, there's no thought necessary to follow it.
Okay.
Thought is always the way in which the mind, uncertain with the experience that it's having, to try to find some kind of peace or condition that it's comfortable with, so now it knows. The kind of knowing that we're interested in is actually is the disappearance of the knower, the self that's always separate from everything that seems to take place to it. You know, the self that gets the zinger is the zinger sender. Something like that. It won't be a famous quotation, but there you go. On we go.
So then at the
Go ahead,
sorry.
Lucy. No, you got
So I was just going to add one little bit. So then at the end, like, so if you take it all the way through, it just kind of would dissipate on its own?
Yeah,
Like,
I didn't put it in the talk, but I have spoken recently about this idea that everything that exists in a relationship, and all relationships are intended to bring about the fulfillment of the conditions that created them. In this instance, in order for resistance to be fulfilled, its purpose, it must be completed. And what we do is this resistance comes up in one form or another, and we attempt to complete the moment instead of letting the moment reveal to us that it's complete if we'll just let the Trinity work itself out. If we'll just let God have his way with what it is that we're given to experience, then we can take action towards the conditions if necessary, but we're not involved psychologically trying to save our bacon, escape a prison, or whatever the pain may be. We're a participant in life instead of outside of it, trying to pull it through and into the conditions we see as favorable to ourselves. So it's experiential, Lucy. You just have to go through it. It's little by little in one respect. All at once, but little by little. Here comes this fear. It's telling me, ho, 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 go, do, save, protect, buy, telling me. And then one day I say, you know what? I've had this experience so many times and I always interfere with it. I wonder if I let it go on, what'll happen? And then I start to realize the experience is trying to complete itself. And if I let the experience of these energies complete themselves, lo and behold, I'm not apart from these energies or their completion. And then there's a unity that transpires. Then I'm no longer afraid of my own experience. How can I be, things we don't ever, how can I be afraid of the experience of myself? How is that possible? How's that possible? Other than I got yelled at for experiencing something and manifesting it. I was told, no, that's not, no, don't be like that. Then I spend the rest of my life living in mortal fear of anything that comes up in me that resembles some experience that I got punished for, socially, economically, parentally, or whatever it may be. And the problem with this is that everything I say, I have to say something else. That doesn't mean you have license to be cruel. Because cruelty is the unlicensed aspect of a nature living in a tiny bandwidth that believes anything that challenges it has to be squashed. On we go, John.
On we go. We'll go next to this written question that was left over from our last class. It came from Tony, but as I reread it, it very much, I think, connects to what Guy's talking about today. Here's what she said. She said, I am enduring a rather challenging period in my life as I learn on-the-job skills and telling truth to power. Your recent talk on Insight Timer last Saturday regarding false guides was powerful. I'm now using those 6 identifiers daily. I would truly appreciate further guidance you can provide in terms of an executive approach in this regard. For example, the need to tell someone their information is misleading or downright false is painful for me. All I can think to do is present the evidence and hope they see it for themselves. I feel this may be a cop-out, or is it enough? Or, of course, the answer is both. Sometimes it is enough and sometimes it isn't, and I have to listen to true guide. Please guide those of us facing these types of crises in self-identity. I have learned sitting back and listening is important. Nowadays, I am learning that if the silent majority of us stay silent, unconsciousness persists. I truly appreciate all you do and wish you ongoing energy, and with very best regards, Tony.
Wow. Hi, Tony. I don't know if you can see it. I probably can. And there was at least 3 different eyes that wrote that particular question. First I'm on this side, then I'm on that side, then I'm in between, and then all's good, but I'm not sure, because if it's all good, then something bad may happen after all. This is our mind, Tony. So I was sitting here while I was listening to the question, and although I answered it pretty completely in the last hour, I'll just say this. Here's the last 5 words that any aspirant wants to hear with regards to unwanted moments, but the only 5 words that will bring an end to the experience of them. You ready? Repeat after me. I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out. What is this prison other than a mind filled with knowledge, conditioned to believe that this is acceptable, that's not? This is what freedom is. This is where prison lies. So that every thought I have about outcome isn't just a thought about the outcome if something isn't done. It's the outcome as it affects me. And everything is seen as it affects me. The only way you'll ever be free of the me it affects is when you see there's no such me there except for the special effect of a sense of self that comes up every time you look in a moment and try to figure out how to come out smelling like a rose. You can't come out of every moment smelling like a rose. You don't even know what a real rose smells like. Why am I afraid to find out? Can you see the one? I kind of want to know exactly how to handle. How many of you want to know exactly? This is why people don't like this teaching. Look, you're not being clear. Tell me how to deal with this. I want to know. Sausage. Bandwidth. Because if you don't say what I want to know and it's within the barrier, the boundary of what I know, you don't know. And you're my enemy, maybe. That's why it's difficult. A true teaching always finds a certain ground between the ionosphere, the upper atmosphere, and the planet. There's always something that has to correspond to both, given to the character of the person listening. Because if there isn't something that kind of touches you, we're dead in the water. But if it touches you in too much of a manner or too out of reach, then you're gone. So you have to, I can't always be the in-between person. I am a bridge keeper. But I can't always play the role for individuals given your circumstances. You have to be the one who sees, you know what? I'm not sure how to handle this. And what Tony's saying is that I vacillate back and forth and back and forth. Yeah? And what's the vacillation? What's the vacillation? Is it intelligence? We think it is. Is vacillation intelligence? What is it? Uncertainty. What is uncertainty? The fear of going and having an experience that I'm not prepared for or that might cost me something. You must let every experience as needed cost you everything. Otherwise, you'll never find out. You'll never find out. This talk, I told John to tell Kate, is all about understanding that I don't want to go through that again, is you saying, I want to avoid any experience that's uncomfortable for me. And I'm telling you, don't avoid uncomfortable experiences. First, just be willing to see them. Eventually, you will want to go into them. That's what it means to give yourself a shock. I agree to experience voluntarily the development of an understanding that isn't afraid of anything that it doesn't understand. I agree to it, because then my understanding is expanded. On we go.
We'll go next to our queue. Janice is in the queue, so Janice, I'm going to unmute you. Good morning. Hello, Janice.
Waiting for the green. No green yet.
All right.
There it is.
There she is. Hello.
Well, the green's there, but no Janice. Are you there, Janice? We'll have somebody work with you in the back end, maybe, if we can, and then we'll have to move along.
All right, we'll move along. Sarah is in our queue next, and so let's see if Sarah's there. Hello, Sarah. Are you there? Good morning.
I see.
Hey there.
There you are. Hi, Sarah.
Yeah. Hey, how are you?
Pretty good.
I asked a question last time you went live, and I'm having the opportunity to kind of apply, what you said to kind of like put the gloves down. But it's not really a question, but I'm currently, like, as of right now, going through an experience where I'm able to apply what you were talking about, where I don't need to kind of control the experiences externally. I'm kind of like getting to know somebody right now, and my everything's been great. There's no red flags or anything, but my intuition is telling me to go ahead and end things with him. And yesterday it was just really strong. I was like, for no reason, I just had this like intuition to go ahead and end things. And in the past, when I haven't listened to my intuition, I've waited around to figure out. I've waited around for evidence before listening to my intuition. And then sure enough, the evidence always comes. Like, my intuition's always spot on. But in this case, because there's no red flags or anything, I'm like, I want to end things because my intuition is telling me, but my mind is telling me that everything's fine. There's no red flags. Just wait it out. This isn't so much about that. It's more so about what you were saying, the spiritual side of it. It's just they're overlapping.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a learning opportunity for me here because I feel it right now. Like, I want to text him. He went, on vacation. He got back and he's like, hey, let's, hang out tomorrow. Let's go to dinner. There's nothing wrong with dinner, but I want to just say, actually, no.
Okay.
I think we should stop talking now,
I get it. So you're not in a sausage, you're in a pickle.
Yeah. And I feel like, but sitting here resisting the urge to text him and say, actually, and I could list reasons why, and what I would say, because I typed it out.
Sarah,
what I would say is,
I got it. I really got it. Believe me.
Yeah.
Your experience is not unlike every other human being on this planet who I want to, I don't want to, I should, I shouldn't, maybe this is good, maybe it's not. This is the vacillation of a mind that is forever trying to get everything into a little cubby hole where it can feel content and confident with its actions. So I would never tell you, end, don't end, begin, don't begin. I would never say that to you. I would simply say, wait, watch, and see. If there's this sense, as I get from you, this immediacy of you seeing a red flag that you say you don't see, that's what intuition is a forbearing of something that hasn't happened yet, but that seems like it will. I just don't know how to say it. Because look, let's say that, Sarah, let's say you say, okay, I'm going to send him a text, which, by the way, is never the proper way to end a relationship. Don't be a coward. Be responsible. I say, I'm going to end this, and I end it. The whole time I'm getting ready to end it, and maybe even after I've ended it, what happens inside of Sarah? Did I do the right thing? Because now there's a little space in my life. I'm not sure what to fill the space with. And I tend to run into these kind of relationships where I do this vacillation. All of us do. On the other hand, well, I'm going to go into this. And then I get out to dinner, and the next thing I know, he's saying, can I move in with you? I lost my job. Well, that's right. And suddenly I'm terrified to say, what, are you kidding? I don't want anything to do with you. Because then you're going to think I'm not a nice person. And while I really don't care what you think about me anymore, because you have no means, I do want you to like me. So this is the insanity of this mind. And the answer isn't to try to choose one side or the other, Sarah. It is to be the witness to the full experience of all of this vacillation, so that you can see, little by little, something about your character as this condition is revealing it. If you grow in your character through the revelation of these conditions, then you will be better and better equipped to no longer be afraid of making a decision or not making a decision, because you'll understand your life is not going to hinge on whether or not you make one decision that's right or wrong. Life doesn't work that way. Life is an endless series, unfortunately, of decisions that we judge ourselves according to. But one day when the decision is only that I want to see and understand as best I can this moment, then the moment will come and the moment will go. But you will leave the circumstance a wiser woman than went into it. And that's the real victory. That's the best I can say to you, Sarah. On we go, John.
Go ahead and
come on up, Chrissy.
We're all not so dissimilar. My name's Chris. What do we struggle with all day long is the problem that comes, and then what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? And then days or weeks or months, however long the neurosis continues, or even if it's not constant, as soon as there's an empty space, back in comes the number one problem that your mind has identified that needs to be handled. And the thing is we always just want it handled so it goes away. We never want to stay in the middle so that we can see the nature that is always in conflict. It doesn't matter what it says it's in conflict over, but it's always in conflict, seeking for resolution, and even when it gets the momentary resolution, it's off to the next thing. And we can never be free of any of that unless we learn to stay in the middle and watch the conflicted nature that basically runs our life.
Terry, go to the piano, will you? Just randomly strike 5 or 6 notes. Yeah. Pick another 5 or 6. Now, I'm home, and if you understand this, all these wheels within wheels within wheels, the spheres, the planets, the galaxy, everything moving. And as it's moving, every last one of these sounding out in trillihertz, in endless vibration, all this music. And every once in a while when they line up, peace and harmony rule. When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, I'm beautiful. And then when Jupiter intersects Saturn and there's a problem with the asteroid belt and all those notes sound at once, I'm sitting at home, and the thing that is most familiar to me that bothers me immediately appears to define the sound that was set off in the soul. And now I know I've got to go back into that again. And there was nothing to go back into. The symmetry and the similarity of the notes just brought up something, and this mind has to know what to do with this conflict. For these notes, they're not right. Remember what he did to you 22 years ago? Oh my God, next week, I've got a doctor's appointment. What if it's fatal? Why? And nothing happened. Except that little bandwidth that was bothered by something outside of it has to know what bothered it so it can contain it, control it, and protect itself. Thanks, Terry. John.
This is a written question that came in from Dolores. Dolores says, I'm still trying to live without my husband who passed away almost 1.5 years ago. It's really difficult after being married to him for 60 years. I'm 84. In one of the past emails, you mentioned that if I wanted to ask Guy a question, he was addressing this, I think, to Kate, you would help me with the process. Don't know how. So I wanted to ask him if he has some suggestions to help me through this difficult time. Really lonesome for him.
Dolores, I don't know how long you've been working with me, studying this work. So I hope that you'll be able to follow this. I don't know what the difference between a metaphor and an analogy is. I think this is a metaphor. When does the fruit fall off of the tree? When it's ripe. Sometimes a piece of fruit will hang on, and when it gets past ripe, and what happens to the fruit? It rots, becomes corrupted, as it were, becomes something else other than a piece of fruit, still doing the same thing. It's just feeding the ground instead of a human mouth. So there isn't anything in creation, Dolores, that isn't part of that process of birth, life, ripening, death. Nothing. Everything completes itself. That's why I say life is self-settling. Everything eventually completes itself. Now, all of us have things that are far from complete. Would you agree? She's speaking of grief. You can fill in for yourself what is far from complete, because what you know is far from complete is anything that you fight with. Whatever you fight with in life has yet to be completed in the consciousness responsible for its repeated appearance. Karma comes to an end in a particular case when at last the lesson in that moment has been learned. So here I am, I'm Dolores. I'm still dealing with this grief. Why am I still dealing with this grief? She said, it's because I'm lonely. One can understand that. I've been married for 40 years, longer. Yeah. Patricia leaves, although I promised that she could go first. That's our deal. So she didn't have to suffer what Dolores is going through. But I'm not afraid for Patricia suffering what Dolores is going through, because I know she'll be able to turn what she goes through into a new order of understanding that'll understand this is just part of this life. Death is part of life. So if you can understand that there is a certain fruit, and then why is it still there? It isn't complete. Why hasn't it been completed? Because there's something in me that is keeping it in place. Add to this, Dolores, as best you can. I'm lonely. Can anybody tell me why loneliness is painful? Why is loneliness painful? And you're going to make up an answer. There's no reason that loneliness is painful. Loneliness is painful because I resist the idea of being alone. That's why loneliness is painful. There's no me to be alone without someone who imagines myself separate from some experience I had before where I wasn't lonely. Now I'm lonely. So loneliness, the pain of it, is born out of comparison. And to even suspect that's true, Dolores, is to at least I'm going to bring something new into this. I wake up in the morning, I'm used to having coffee and toast with my husband, with looking at him reading, with looking at the newspaper, not his face. Or today it's iPads or whatever the hell it is. Bring something new into the experience by being willing to experience it in a new way. Bring something new into the experience by being willing to experience in a new way. What would be a new way to experience this loneliness? What would be a new way? Let's help Dolores. Anybody? Not allowing that one thought and feeling to dominate me as it always does. So I'm going to, as best I can, agree to observe that instead of serve it through being the instrument of that pain. Just one little tweak in the observer will change the whole experience. And the more you see that the experience can change, the more you realize I was never chained to that experience the way this little bandwidth of myself says I am. I hope that helps, Dolores. Let us know. Experiment. I'm going to find out.
We're at 10 after, Guy. I have 2 written questions, no hands in the queue. You want to?
Let's go.
All right. This question came in from Susanna, and it seems very much related to what you just said. She says, so what did you do the next time your heart was broken again?
Stop there. I started drinking. Go on.
How many times? What did
I'm
you...
still drinking.
She says, I'm asking with all due respect. We have all experienced the sting of that heartbreak, not just from a love interest, but any type of relationship.
What did I do? Well, I don't know if you remember this experience. How many of you ever ate too much and said, you know what, I swear to God, I'm never going to eat again as long as I live? Yes or no? Did you eat again? Did you even remember? The day after, you might have thought, you know, this is crazy. How could I possibly be hungry again when I wanted to die last night? What, I'm really considering eating that chocolate when I know that it's a killer for me? No. Yes. Chocolate. Chocolate, 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 food, food, food. Pleasure, 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 bandwidth, bandwidth, bandwidth. So you can tell yourself to the cows come home, you know, I'm never going to love again, I'm never going to eat again, I'm never going to talk to that person again. And then he or she walks into your life, or that beautiful pizza that you can smell on the other table while you're struggling through a salad without dressing. We all know this, don't we? How can we all have the same experience? Same bandwidth, same mind, same prison. You say to yourself, I'm never going to get hurt again. You're avoiding discovering that the you that was hurt did in fact feel all that pain, but that is not the limit of your possibilities, nor should it ever be seen as such. Because the avoidance of any condition is being imprisoned by the consciousness that fears it. The avoidance of any condition is being imprisoned by the consciousness that fears it. How can I be a prisoner of my own consciousness unless I don't know that there's more to me than meets the eye? Eyes to see, ears to hear. Find out, Susanna. I can tell you one thing, and I'll leave it here, and then we'll go to the last question. If every time I feel a fear or a resistance, and I take the moment of that fear or resistance to be the summation of all that is possible or that should be considered in the moment, given the consequences if that happens the way I've imagined it. If I take that to be the full sum of possibilities, in that moment, I have begun I have begun to die by avoidance. Like that. I have begun to die by avoidance. Christ said, let the dead bury the dead. What in the name of God was Christ mentioning? He was saying that there's somebody that has to be put in the ground. But I can't follow you. I can't do this work. I can't blah, blah, blah. I have to take care of that. He said, let the dead bury the dead. Who's the dead? The dead is anybody who believes that the only possibility in any given moment is the way their mind says it has to be experienced and therefore avoided or pursued. Those are dead human beings. Dead human beings are those who have not only been consigned through conditioning, inescapable in this planet when we start, to believe that the sum of this conditioning is the sum of my possibilities. That's what dead is, because it will shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. So that you literally, you don't know it. Maybe you know some people like this. I've seen them all my life. This is a dead human being. They have died. They are beyond consequence in terms of changing their life. It has become, as Christ said, the weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. The outer darkness that is the product of a nature resisting itself until it is squashed into this tiny little pea-like thing that can never change. Not because God doesn't will it, but because it doesn't will to know anything outside of the love of itself, which is its pain.
All right, the last question that we have that we'll end with. this portion of the discussion with comes from Carl, and it is in response to a short talk on our YouTube channel about learning to follow your heart. Carl asks, how do we learn more about ourselves through hobbies and careers? What are some tips I could practice here to learn more about myself through them? Many thanks.
A bifurcated answer, but it's a singularity, Carl. If on one hand I'm drawn to something, the love that has drawn me to that is the only reward, and it'll be the only thing I experience as I discover through that relationship the aspects of experience of myself I couldn't have otherwise. A man or woman becomes a master by letting love master them. They give themselves completely to what they are drawn to without taking any possible sense of self, without deriving any identity from what they are drawn to. They're not trying to make themselves into something through that hobby or that avocation, through that career. You're dead in the water the minute that you want to make something of yourself because you've imagined by doing something that it will make you something more than you are. You're already dead in the water. And you will avoid anything that comes along that challenges what you've identified with and the means to accomplish that. On the other hand, if you have the love of something, you've already won. Because the love will take you through each and every single one of those little borders. It'll take you right through every one of those moments where you would rather avoid that circumstance, but you understand love has no avoidance in it. Love avoids nothing. Love avoids nothing. Love avoids nothing. That's why you want love in your life. You want love to be your life. God is love. Welcome the experience of yourself that God gives you through every revelation, and love will lead you to a relationship with itself, and that's what freedom is.
That's all I have here, or if there's any students who wish to come up and speak, now's the time.
Hi, my name's Debbie, and something in Debbie loves music, and I could really resonate with this whole talk. And I decided to put myself out there and do something that I'd never done before. You know, I'd taken piano lessons and stuff, but I decided to take violin lessons. And it's amazing how many lessons you can learn from just an instrument like that. For instance, and maybe, you know, other people know about this, but I didn't know that if you strike a certain note on a certain string, like a D on an A string, for instance, the same note will resonate on an open string that you're not even touching. You can hear it. It'll vibrate, and that's got to do with, you know, things in us. When something hits us, it'll resonate with the same thing in us, and that's what we're supposed to see. Is it's the same thing in us. It's not something we're supposed to, you know, identify with or anything, and that's what happens. So then there's another lesson that I've learned that I would consider my violin teacher a master. He says that if you strike two different notes on a violin, and you have to be really aware to be able to hear this, but there will be a tone that's developed out of thin air that is in the room somewhere else. It might be on the violin itself, but sometimes you'll hear this note. It's not even part of the violin, it's somewhere else. And he calls it a tritone. And that's when, you know, an active force will, I thought of this, that the active force meets the passive force, and this beautiful third thing is there for us to witness, the new creation.
To experience as part of the symmetry of the moment, so that has always been a part of myself, as surely as it is in the room or on the instrument that's making it sound itself.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It is fascinating. Come on, Eric. Don't waste your life.
Good morning. My name is Eric. And there's two axioms that really apply to my ordeal with my eye surgeries. And one is youth is wasted on the young. That is an axiom. And the other is you don't know what you've got until it's gone. And you don't know how many, I've had a lot of conversations with myself about, I've seen a lot of conversations want to take place about, you know, I'm gonna go blind, my life, I won't be able to drive anymore, I won't get to see every island in the South Pacific. Everything about my life is going to change. I won't be able to do what I want. I've seen all of these conversations want to start in me. I've participated in some, and I've just seen some and dropped them as best as I can. But the ironic part is I can see now. And I don't mean to be sentimental, but I'm not saying this sentimentally, there's no appreciation now.
Exactly.
In the right way, that I can see now. And yet I'm thinking about in a future time when I won't be able to see. And that's a little metaphor for what goes on all the time with us.
Come on up, Kate.
Good morning, my name is Kate. First of all, Eric is my husband, and I didn't know you had a yellow shirt like that. I've never ever seen that shirt before, so it was somewhere in the closet, I don't know where. Related to what he was just talking about, Guy, when you responded to Dolores's question, in there you said, bring something new to the experience by being willing to experience something new. I think that's what you said.
That's close enough, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say that out loud again. I thought that was, you know, sometimes you hear something in a talk that, like, you can just take that one line for the rest of your day or the rest of your week or the rest of your life and work with it, and it will make a difference. I mean, I was thinking, like, wow, you know, think of a relationship with someone where you resist one another and how that pattern just kind of repeats and repeats and repeats because there's nothing in me that's willing to bring something new to the experience by being willing to experience something new. And if I could remember that in that like in those moments, there would be an instant change in me, in the other person. I mean, there's no way, if you meet the moment differently, it guarantees that the moment will change. Even if it doesn't change in the way that you imagine, like suddenly the other person's going to stop being whatever they are.
They're like, oh, you're amazing, Kate. I feel so new because look at you.
But it gives a completely new opportunity for, well, it doesn't even, I'm not even going to say it in terms of the other person, okay? But it gives a completely new opportunity inwardly for me, which changes the world like that. I mean, that's not too dramatic to say that. It instantly changes the rest of consciousness.
Yes, indeed it does. He's back for a second dose.
Well, I can't sit down because I'm experiencing a strong sense of gratitude. First of all, for a magnificent talk, and also for every person that has shared today, because there's a resonance.
Yes.
I'm also grateful for an experience that came to me yesterday. I was in the company of another person, and out of nowhere came this dark cloud in the form of a thought. Just came over. Perhaps a better metaphor is it felt like steel black walls had just come up all around me, and I was trapped by this thought and scared because I couldn't see out. It was just dark all around. And I thought, I was fortunate to be with someone that I could just sit in that space, not knowing what to do and feeling very uncomfortable. And then, out of nowhere, about 25 seconds later, the other person said something, and boom! All four walls, black steel walls, collapsed, and there was clear space once again. It had dissolved like that. Something that I'm very familiar with. It visits me a lot, but in this instance, perhaps, I was able to do something different.
Something different happened.
And something different happened. I watched it collapse. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And I suspect ties in with a theme that a lot of people have explored in what they've shared today, and I was grateful for that experience.
Think of instantaneous collapse. Instantaneous collapse. What happens when the shadow runs from the forest into the field where the sunlight is? What happens is the shadow it can't go there, can it? Instantaneous collapse. Hold that train.
Good morning, my name is Dana. Wonderful talk, and at the end when you said, experience it all at once, I heard quite clearly, how is that possible? Because I'm covered in conditioning, so I'm just going to be experiencing my conditioning. But is that the point? I think a real question in here, but I'm getting, I don't know if I have it, but that's what came up in me. I wanted to pop up right then when you said that, because I feel like that Stay Puft, guy.
Yeah.
My conditioning is just, around me, and so anything true or new or anything tries to come in, it just keeps hitting that over and over again, and if I'm not awake to it, it just spins around and around.
Boy, you're in a tough spot now. Yes, you are.
Leave the details out of it, but yes, I am.
Yes, you are. Okay, I have nothing more to say. Go sit down.
Great.
The ultimate paradox, contradiction, is that on one hand, there is something in me that under no circumstances want to be free. And on the other hand, inside of that shell, that sense of self, there's something that was created as the manifestation of freedom itself. And my task is to be present enough to see that knee-jerk part of myself that comes up and says, because the very entrance of the thought, Dana, that's impossible, makes it impossible. Can I see that? Who am I without the thought, I can't? Who am I without the thought, it'll never? Who am I without that? Because is that not the defining, the sides of the bandwidth? Is that not it? So you mustn't think of yourself as someone who's going to slay the dragon of defeat with some magic spiritual sword that Christ put in your hand. That's insanity. But can I see a little more deeply? You obviously saw something because it created this disturbance in you. I can feel this idea of all at once. I've known all at once. I was on a sailboat and there was dolphin in the water, and all at once there was no me thinking, oh, this is unbelievable. There was just the unbelievable experience of participating in this movement. All at once. That's always there. But this part of Dana, this unconscious nature that is Dana in everyone, has no interest whatsoever in being unbound. Because unbounded, there's no Dana. There's just this pure experience of all at once. The task is to gradually see that instead of all at once, I have this little part and that part. I have the worst of both worlds instead of the best of both. And there's no other way to put it. You have to find out. But let this little glimpse, if all there was makes it impossible, then how could you see that moment that took place just now? That has to come from outside of that impossibility, doesn't it? Because if it's really impossible, that's all there is, just this little bandwidth. But I can see that. So that means something that is aware of another kind of experience sits outside of that. You are a very intellectual type, Dana, although you don't know the size of your heart yet. It'll come. That intellect always wants to think through the situation instead of experience the situation that negates thinking it altogether. Yeah, come on, Leah. You will be the last.
Hi, my name is Leah. So Dana brought up something that I've been really experiencing the last week or two in myself. It's very challenging to see the subtleties of, example, what Guy just talked about when we're really busy. When there's a lot of exterior noise, to-dos, momentum, the adrenaline, the Leah, the bravado that comes with all that motion. This work, it becomes very difficult to do. I've really seen that. And it's not to say you can't be busy. But it's very, for me, I'm seeing it's very important to stay on that line of seeing which side of that busy this nature's on and which side it's paying more attention to. Leah, or being able to watch Leah. That's all.
It's well said. Very important to understand. You stay with your work. One day you'll understand that you can be doing your Father's business wherever you are and whatever is going on. If you have to go into practical thought, you're in practical thought. But practical thought does not a self make.